Utah's path to the college football playoff was already going to be very difficult year in and year out. It got even harder based on what this committee just did to BYU.
You are Locked On Utes, your daily podcast on the Utah Utes. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Hello, everyone, and thank you for making Locked On Utes your first listen and view of the day. We are part of the Locked On Podcast Network, available wherever you get your podcasts, as well as on YouTube. If it's your first time listening to our show, make sure you like and subscribe. We are part of the #1 sports podcast network, Locked On, so thank you for making us your first listen and view of the day. Today's episode is brought to you by Game Time. Download the Game Time app, create an account, and use code Locked On College, all caps, no space, for $20 off your first purchase. My name is J.T. Wistrcill, excited to be joined by the co-host of the PFF College Football Show, Dalton Wasserman, to talk about Utah versus Nebraska. We got our bowl game, the Las Vegas Bowl. Also talk about if Utah should have opted out of it. They shouldn't have, but we're going to talk about the end. But first, we have to start by talking about BYU. And I'm a little surprised that we start here with this, Dalton, honestly. But the more I just think about Utah's future path to the CFP, it's always going to be hard when you're not in the SEC or the Big Ten, because you only can lose a game or two, and then it's like, oh, your season's over. That's what happened with Utah, right? Lost 2 games, and they were done. But now you're telling me an 11-1 regular season team, and even if you lose, and lost in the conference title game, I get that, I know. This isn't just BYU, this is any Big 12 team. Like, Utah's path to the CFP just got harder for me based on not just how the rankings shook out, but honestly, based on how BYU was covered by ESPN throughout this college football playoff, rankings reveal process.
Absolutely agree. I think the Big 12 and the ACC are in a real predicament here because they just seem to not get the benefit of the doubt when it comes to the selection process, right? And of course, this year the ACC, you saw it with Miami eventually getting in, but it took forever for them to be able to flip them with Notre Dame. And then BYU, obviously, I think the 2 big flaws in this process the entire time were that Notre Dame was ranked too high in the initial rankings and stayed there. And then BYU was ranked too low and had to climb their way up there, even though their resume, when you compare it, cut out conference title week, this second loss to Texas Tech, 11-1, wins over a ranked Utah, a ranked Arizona, a good Cincinnati team, TCU, Iowa State. Yeah, there wasn't a whole lot out of conference to work with, but when you compare their resumes to an Ole Miss or an Oregon, they really weren't all that different. You can easily make a case that BYU should have been at least number 8 going into this weekend, and then you could make a decision from there. To me, the argument for those last 2 spots should have been 4 teams: BYU, Miami, Alabama, Notre Dame, and not the 3 that it was made out to be really for the better part of 2 or 3 weeks on TV.
I'll even say I've seen people talk about how, hey, it's too bad this wasn't a 16-team playoff because we could have gotten Texas and Vanderbilt in. And I'm like, hey, we're here. Like Utah, we would be part of that too if it was 16. But we didn't close the year well. But all anyone is talking about are SEC and Big Ten brands. And I was fascinated yesterday to see ESPN never even put up on the graphic about, hey, BYU has a shot in this. There were really rarely any questions asked about a BYU too. And look, here's how I see it. BYU deserved to be in the field. I actually believe that. If you were to say, are they one of the best teams? That's where I'm probably like, you know what? I'd probably take them out from that just because, look, you got blown out in 2 championship games. But the fact they weren't even part of the conversation, like you mentioned in Ole Miss, being up where they are, Oklahoma too, those teams have 1 win that's probably slightly better than BYU's best win over Utah, but it's not a crazy better win too. So it's just really strange to me that BYU, it almost seemed like it was intentional, how excluded they were throughout this process. And like I mentioned, it has me concerned for if Utah's in this spot in the future. You better at least compete in the big game you play against that good team, because even if you're 11-1 and lose your conference title game, you're not guaranteed a spot in this.
It seems like the strength of schedule metrics, just for whatever reason, don't favor the Big 12 and the ACC at all. And I'm not at all trying to say those conferences are as deep as the SEC, but I'm not a believer that, the SEC, yes, it's the deepest conference, but I'm not a believer that that chasm is so wide that the Big 10 is somehow so much lesser, that the Big 12 is so much lesser, right? Yes, it was a down year for the ACC, but still a good conference with a lot of good teams, right? I think it is more even than we think. And I think what the Big 12 teams are going to have to try to do then is just find more out-of-conference games against the SEC. Go out there and prove it early in the season on the field. And if those teams are the ones that don't want to sign the contracts, man, you find a way to make them do it. Then go on the road and beat them, or do it however, that it needs to be done. But to me, as far as these 4 teams, the way I've started to look at it at the end of the process, and then as they were being selected, if you want resume and wins, right, and call it, like you mentioned, who deserves it, it's probably Alabama and BYU. BYU's
Mhm.
got a really underrated resume, right?
Yeah.
If it's more towards the eye test and certain, say, offensive and defensive metrics, and even I say all the time that our PFF grades, they are a reflection of the tape, and that then the grades would tell you that Miami and Notre Dame are the two top teams there, but it is about wins and losses still. It's not just about offensive efficiency and the grading and this. It's one component, and it's a component that can help you. But at the end of the day, wins and losses matter. That's why Notre Dame is out instead of Miami. That's why Alabama, to me, yes, they lost to Florida State, but there's more good wins on their resume than almost any team in the country. And there's been too much focus on, losses, right? And I get it. The Florida State loss is bad, but their other two are to Oklahoma and to Georgia, a team that's split. And BYU's two losses are to the current number 4 team in the country, right? Dominant, both of them, yes. But, okay, we can admit Texas Tech is just better than them. We know this. It depends on your balance of how you evaluate these teams. Metrics, eye test, performance versus, hey, wins and losses and resume, because that's what the game is really about.
It's just wild to me to see how this all played out, as we mentioned, like BYU week after week, not even asked questions by Hunter Yurachek. And the thing, I've been not pro committee, I guess, but I've been fine with the committee. Like, hey, I like this better than the computers. That's what I've been saying for the past few years. But when I hear them talk about how, well, we didn't want to penalize Alabama for playing in the conference championship game. But then it's, oh, well, BYU lost in the conference championship game, so we were able to move them down. I'm like, wait, what are we doing? And then the same thing of the whole Miami Notre Dame thing. Everyone's mad about it because it's like, yes, Miami had the head-to-head over Notre Dame, but you had Notre Dame ahead of Miami when their resumes were complete in terms of they hadn't played another game Tuesday to Sunday when these rankings and resumes flipped. I'm okay I'm ready to shake this up now, honestly. I'm okay if we do away with the committee and want to go back. I don't know if computers per se, but I've heard people talk about like a defined path to the playoff. Maybe it is time we do away with conference championship games. I don't love that, but if we're going to have like a couple play-in games or something like that, this doesn't feel like it's the right way to be doing this with how these things can just swap basically whenever they feel like it almost, or, oh, we could compare Miami and Notre Dame because they were next to each other. They were one spot separated. Why couldn't you compare them? Like, it's just, I don't know, Dalton. It feels like this might be the whole, and obviously 2 G5 teams making in, which I'm a fan of. I didn't want to see Duke in this. I'm glad those teams are in there. But it just feels like this whole process is going to and the way the rankings shook out, it feels like this is what's going to finally lead to a change to the format. Well, I shouldn't say finally, because just another change, because it's constantly changing these last few years.
I think the change that is going to come, as opposed to, some sort of conference realignment or changing up just completely how we do the schedule and all that stuff. I think the first change that's going to come is they're going to talk about going to 16 and very soon, right? So in this case, you would have gotten Notre Dame. You probably would have Texas, Utah was right in that mix. Were they number 15? Was it Utah? I think.
Yes.
I think just one of those things where that is going to be the first part that gets changed is the number of teams. And I still think you should include the group of 5 in there, at least one slot, right? I have no issue with that whatsoever. The fact that it was 2 this year was just caused really by a loophole because it's 5 highest ranked conference champions, and the ACC kind of failed to have that part of it. So I think one more expansion is probably what's going to come. But to me, there needs to be a further transparency of criteria, because head-to-head wasn't used the entire time. And then it was the last week. And then, Alabama, like you mentioned, they don't get punished, but BYU did. And it feels inconsistent. And then, like you mentioned, I don't know why there weren't more questions asked about BYU earlier, in the weeks earlier. For 4 or 5 weeks, there should have been questions asked about why are they this low? Why are they the lowest one-loss team? Why are they the first team to end the regular season 11-1 outside of the top 10? So it needs to be. I think the criteria needs to be looked at, and I even think the presentation needs to be looked at. Do we need this visible every single week, or should we just ride AP voting until we get to the very final one? Because that's what they do in college basketball, right?
It's just, they do one show. That's it. One show.
They get to the end and we have our fun 2-hour show, and boom, that's your bracket, right? I wonder if that is the way to do it. I know TV ratings and all that stuff are going to be what they are, but it feels like now having this and having them need to explain it every week and redefine everything every week, it's just not working.
It's not working. It's causing tons of controversy. And hey, I mean, you got the Utah guy talking about it, so that shows you how wild and just crazy this whole thing ended up shaking out to be. But, speaking of just the fallout of all this, we do have Utah's bowl matchup. They're going to take on Nebraska in the present. So how is that one going to play out? We're going to talk about it in one moment. Today's show is brought to you by Omaha Steaks. The holidays come with two big goals: feeding people well and finding gifts they'll actually love. And when you want both handled in one move, Omaha Steaks is the way to go. From hosting to gifts, they deliver the world's best steak experience right to your door. Because during their Sizzle All the Way sale, you can stock up and save in a huge way. 50% off site wide at omahasteaks.com. And it gets even better. Locked On College listeners get an extra $35 off with code COLLEGE at checkout. That's right, an extra $35 off with the code college. It's all caps, those spaces, college at checkout. I love how easy of a gift it is. Shows up frozen, packed beautifully, ready to cook, and the holiday magic is just made easy. Order by 6 p.m. ET and it ships the same day. Save big on gourmet gifts, made and more holiday favorites with Omaha Steaks. Visit omahasteaks.com for 50% off site wide during the Sizzle All the Way sale. And for an extra $35 off, use the promo code college, all caps, no spaces, at checkout. Terms apply. See site for details. That's omahasteaks.com with the code college to get the deal today. Today's show is also brought to you by our friends at Woodward. We're just going to say it. The fun per foot ratio at Woodward Park City is second to none. Located just 20 minutes from the Salt Lake Valley, Woodward offers experiential learning in a radically fun and safe environment. With facilities for all abilities, the door is always open to first-timers and regulars alike. Bounce from parks to pits, ramps to tramps, and back again. Mountain Park season passes are now on sale for just $499. Rip hot laps with a posse after school and into the evening. Maximize mountain time this winter at one of the best terrain parks in Utah all season long. Looking to go all in? The All Access membership provides just that. From passes to perks, discounts, and more. Just starting out, learn to fly with the Woodward Tribe in seasonal and multi-week programs that build skills and confidence in a Stoke-inspiring environment. Just 20 minutes from Salt Lake, Woodward offers experiential learning with facilities for all abilities. Learn more at woodwardparkcity.com today. The Utah Bowl matchup is set. They are going to be taking on Nebraska in the Las Vegas Bowl. And look, it's a long way away, obviously. On New Year's Eve, it's going to be played. But this one, Dalton, as I look at it, I think the thing I'm really interested to see is just what this Nebraska team looks like. I feel like I have a pretty good idea of what Utah is going to be. We'll see about some opt-outs and things of that nature because, guys, NFL draft potential. We'll talk about that in a moment. But this is a very interesting Nebraska team. I mean, 7-5. I remember a time they were ranked. They got a nice win against Cincinnati earlier in the year. Looked like they were building some momentum, but they wound up losing 3 of their last 4, including getting hammered at Penn State once, and not Penn State now, like the Penn State when everything was bad, 37-10, and then lost to Iowa 40-16. I mean, maybe they quit on the season, but I don't know. I'm really curious to see what Matt Rule's team will look like. By the way, how about two just complete opposite coaches personality-wise, Matt Rule and Kyle Whittingham in this one. But I'm really curious to see what Nebraska will look like because they seemed like a team that's ready to be done with the season. I'm glad they didn't opt out like a bunch of other teams did. But Utah seems like they're going to be fired up and ready to roll. What are you expecting out of the Cornhuskers in this one?
I agree. I think Utah is going to be fired up. We'll see about Nebraska. I think more so. I don't believe they've quit on their season by any means, but I think the one thing they have, even if they didn't have very many guys opt out, and this is where Utah is going to have a big advantage, their run defense has really struggled all season. You talk about the big loss to Penn State, the big loss to Iowa, and their big offensive line. That's really been the Achilles heel this year for Nebraska. They haven't been explosive enough in the passing game on offense, and their run defense has really struggled. And obviously, when you hear that, I'm sure that's music to your ears as a Utah fan, right? Wayshawn Parker, Devin Dampier, Bird Ficklin, all those guys carving up the front seven. They could do that against Nebraska. I think Utah's actually got a really good opportunity to have an awesome game against this vulnerable Nebraska front seven.
Well, Vegas agrees with you. Utah, according to FanDuel, 13.5-point favorites. And honestly, for the reasons you mentioned, and I talked about too, just the direction these two teams are heading in, I could absolutely see this Utah team rocking and rolling. And then the thing that's going to be so different about Utah as compared to their last couple of bowls, Dalton, is this offense is going to be ready to rock and roll. I remember when Utah last made a bowl game, it was in the Vegas Bowl too. Northwestern, ugly game. Bryson Barnes did not play well, but now it's Devin Dampier. We'll talk about the opt-outs in a moment, but still going to be a really dang good offensive line. Wayshawn Parker, like you mentioned too. Utah should win big. Utah should cover to me in this one. I could see why they're favored by double digits. Do you like that they're favored by double digits? Do you agree with that?
Yeah, I do, because I think everything Utah does is really what Nebraska is trying to avoid as a football team right now. An elite run game, and again, their front seven has struggled all year to stop the run. The secondary is really good. If they get Utah in obvious passing situations, then you could have an issue, but I have a hard time seeing how they're going to do that on early downs. The other thing, too, is Nebraska, for a couple of years now, has really, really struggled against man-to-man coverage, whether that's Dylan Raiola or TJ Lateef, who's been playing quarterback since Raiola got hurt. They struggle to separate against man coverage. They struggle to throwing into man coverage, I should say. And Utah runs more man coverage than any team in the country. So those two factors, one on each side of the ball, I do think gives a big advantage to the Utes.
And you mentioned Raiola's injury, so we'll see which quarterback's out there. But there's also just a matter of if Raiola's on the roster. His brother decommitted from the school, so it's kind of like, oh, whoa, does this mean that Raiola is eventually not going to be there? And since he is nursing an injury as well, too, do you think the Cornhuskers will have Raiola out there, or do you think it'll be Leaf, whether it's for portal or the injury reasons to Raiola?
I don't think he's going to be out there. I don't know that he's ready or even close to ready from the injury, because I believe it was a fractured ankle or something along those lines. I don't think he'll be ready anyway. But keep in mind, too, not only did his brother decommit, his uncle, who was the offensive line coach, I believe, also was let go. The connection that he had there to the coaching staff, albeit a legendary Nebraska family, is not there anymore. So I think this is going to be a situation to watch, and there's going to be potentially a lot of bidders for Raiola in the portal.
It feels like that'll definitely be the case, and that's right. I forgot that he was his uncle, the offensive line coach too. So it'll just be interesting to see. Like we said, this Nebraska team does not feel like one that is heading into the bowl game with momentum. And yes, Utah didn't have their strongest performances to end the season, but wins were wins, and this team clearly just in a better place than the Cornhuskers are right now. But they might not be in as good of a place as they ended the regular season. Dalton, you do a good job covering the NFL. I want to know, for your opinion, I don't think Spencer Fano and Caleb Lomu will play in this game. I hope they do, but I feel like it's not good for their NFL draft stock to risk the injury. Do you think they will opt out?
Most guys that are going to be first-round picks have been opting out lately. I would say probably. I think Fano especially. I think he's just about a lock of a first-round pick, whether it is at tackle or there are some people who think he's a guard. But either way, I think he's a first-rounder. And Lomu is going to get top 50 consideration as well. I would assume, being that they're already graded that high, they're probably going to opt out. But you never know. Maybe Kyle Whittingham convinces him to go for one more ride.
Yeah, and with a guy like Spencer Fano, his brother Logan is going to be playing too. And Spencer's been rolling these last couple of years. Like, does he want to play and win something while he's at Utah too? Because we talked about they did not win their freshman year, obviously, and last year didn't make a bowl game. So does he want to win that? Obviously, he'd be on the sideline. No ill will if he didn't play. And Utah's seen this before, a Dalton Kincaid not playing, a Clark Phillips not playing. So that happens. I do feel like a Lander Barton will play in this one, right? Like, I try to think of who else would be a guy for Utah that I go, he won't play. But like Utah's interior offensive line, they should all play in this game to me. If you're not a slam dunk first round pick or maybe a high second round pick too, I think you can boost your stock with one last strong performance, especially against, is it the greatest, like we said, Big Ten front? No, but it's still Big Ten competition. So I feel like that's something. I feel like most of the rest of the guys for Utah should probably play, right?
Yeah, no, I agree with that. I don't see anybody else other than Fano and Lomu who are like locked top 50 picks like that. I agree with you. A guy like Barton probably should play. And then, it's fun to see him show off the abilities on offense too, just to, give you a little more versatility, a little more of that on tape.
Well, speaking of Lander, I was a little surprised to see he got invited and accepted it to the East-West Shrine Bowl. Now, that's a very good bowl still, but it's not the Senior Bowl. And you know what? I honestly might be fair. At first, I was surprised, but Lander probably didn't have as great of a year as I thought maybe he would. He was a guy, even just a couple of years ago, it seems like a lot of people were a fan of him as maybe a second-round pick going into last season, and it feels like some of that hype has kind of just dwindled a little bit. There's been some missed tackles and maybe not as much of a standout player just as we thought he could be. Still a very good player, hence the invite to the bowl, but do you feel like that's a better fit for him than maybe a Senior Bowl? And where do you think Lander Barton has maybe not lived up to the expectation coming into the year?
Look, I think he's obviously a really good athlete. I don't mind him going to the Shrine Bowl because I do think you get a lot of talent that still goes to the Shrine Bowl. And it's really, I think there are guys who would probably play in both if they weren't so timed up together, right? They're kind of back to back in the schedule. So you got to pick one or the other. And I know the director down there, Eric Yackel, does a ton of work to go and recruit these guys to go and play down there. He even got Shedeur Sanders last year, even though he didn't really participate. But I think Barton, when you look at him, he's a little bit raw, right? He reminds me even at times times a little bit of like Danny Stutzman from Oklahoma was like this last year. I think he eventually went in round 4. He's very raw. He's got that aggressive, fun play style that you like. You just got to reel him in a little bit. I meant to ask you too, have we heard anything about Teo Johnson's prospects too, or what? Because I think that's another guy that would be of real interest to the league also.
I do not think Teo Johnson walked on senior day, and therefore he might be coming back. I mean, the one thing I'll say, Dalton, is you watch the games, like his tackling. I don't know if NFL teams are going to want to touch that, right?
I mean, it depends because he is a ball hawk, man. He gets
amazing
to the football.
coverage,
as a free safety, I mean, I've seen a couple of guys the last 2 years who are pretty solid football players in the NFL. Kalen Bullock out of USC playing for the Houston Texans now. Big questions on his tackling. He was one of the worst tacklers in that draft. Seems to have fixed it in his first couple of years. Xavier Watts from Notre Dame last year, man. Not the best tackler, not the best angles, but, man, when you got guys who are ball hawks and they can create turnovers like those two and like Teo Johnson do, you find a way to work with that, right? Not every guy is going to be perfect. I think he'll be eventually physical enough for sure to play in the NFL. I was just curious. I wasn't sure if he was coming out this year, but if he didn't walk, maybe he's giving it one more run, try to go to the playoff next year with Utah.
Yeah, and we'll see. Maybe he does decide, you know what, it is time for me to go. Maybe the evaluations will be there. So definitely something interesting to monitor. But all of these guys have a decision to opt out in a bowl game because Utah's going to play in their bowl game, as they should. But apparently not everyone's going to. So should Utah have opted out? No, but we're still going to talk about it. Today's show is brought to you by our friends at Game Time. The World Cup is coming back to North America for the first time since 1994. And with 48 teams for the first time ever, it's going to be massive. But let's be honest, getting tickets is usually the hardest part. That's why the Game Time app is so clutch, finally giving a real advantage to fans when it comes to snagging seats. With Game Time, you can track prices dropping in real time, get alerts when great seats open, and buy tickets the moment they hit the app. Puts the power back in your hands and makes going to the World Cup realistic instead of impossible. You pull up the app and the layout makes it super simple to scroll through matchups and compare seat views. How about the seat view feature too? It's a game changer. You literally can see what your view will look like when you're staring at the pitch from the exact seat before you buy. Prices included up front too. How annoying is those late surprise fees? No, none of those when you check out with Game Time. You can take the guesswork out of buying World Cup tickets and even every match, concert, or event tickets with Game Time. Download the Game Time app, create an account, and use code LOCKEDONCollege, all caps, no spaces, for $20 off your first purchase. Again, download the app, make an account, and use code LOCKEDONCollege for $20 off. Swipe, tap, ticket. You can go download Game Time today. Notre Dame has opted out of their bowl game. Several Big 12 schools, Kansas State, Iowa State, and Baylor, have opted out of their bowl game. Should Utah have? No, absolutely not. You should never opt out of a bowl game to me unless there's some really strange circumstances going on. For me, it's an opportunity not just like to watch your team play, like let these guys have a chance to get a reward for the hard season they worked as well. But from a coach's perspective, you get a bunch of extra practices, which I think are awesome development for some of your under the radar guys that next year might play a bigger role on this team too. I think bowl games are great, especially, yes, they have lost their shine. I get it a little bit, but it's still an awesome opportunity. It's an extra game. It's an opportunity to win something. Utah had a really good season. I'm glad they get to compete for something too, even though they're not a CFP team they're going to get shot in the Las Vegas Bowl. I am thrilled that Utah did. I think it would have been ridiculous to opt out of it, just like it is ridiculous what Notre Dame and some of these other teams are doing about it. How do you feel about this whole teams opting out of things? And did Utah make the right choice to play in theirs?
I think they did make the right choice to play. I think if you can play, I'm in favor of it. And look, if you're a team that really is trying to retain your talent and you're trying to figure out what kind of talent you have going into next year, I think playing an extra game, it really can't hurt, right? I do think, though, there's two different situations when you look at, an Iowa State or a Kansas State going over the turnover with new coaching staffs, right? Chris Kleiman leaving for Kansas State and Colin Klein coming in. When you have a Matt Campbell leaving and Jimmy Rogers coming into Iowa State, when they're trying to figure out their new coaching staffs and the roster and everything like that, I understand that side of it, of those two opting out. And obviously they paid a heavy fine for it, $500,000 each. So that doesn't always feel great to just spend $500,000 to do nothing. But I think the case of Notre Dame and even of Baylor is a bit different. And I think it shows you the shifting priorities when it comes to college football at the end of the season and needing to be ready for this portal window coming up January 2nd, needing to understand, because I remember one time Mac Brown told me, we had an interview with him on our show. He said, look, the roster is a three-headed monster now. One is high school recruiting. Two is the portal and bringing guys in. And three, the one that doesn't get talked about enough, is retaining guys and the constant negotiations of what they're being paid, paying guys on your own roster to stay and fending off all the other schools from coming to get them. This is probably a big period when it comes to that and trying to retain your roster as much as you can. So it is a difficult battle that they're fighting off the field right now through the month of December and moving towards the transfer portal. But I think if you have the ability to play those games, you should.
And isn't that what a GM's for, Dalton? Like, it's, yes, head coaches and coach it's involved in that, but every team in the country is dealing with that too. So, and I saw Notre Dame is like, well, apparently their seniors didn't want to play if some of the other captains were going to be out of it. Like, just because a couple guys like the Jeremiah Loves of the world, of course, opt out. Like, you're going to the NFL draft, you're a star, but like the rest of you guys don't want a bowl game, don't want another chance to play football. Like, I know you're frustrated, you got left out. I get that, but it goes against like turning down the opportunity to play. It just goes against everything we love about the sport. Now I'm still shocked by it. And it's just, I hope it's not a trend we soon moving forward. Obviously, Dalton, the future of bowl games looks very interesting, but I mean, someone like Baylor, like if they're going to opt out every time they're not in the college football playoff game, well, they're going to be opted out quite a lot. I think. So I'm glad that Utah's playing it, and especially because this could be a chance for them to celebrate Kyle Whittingham too. So I hope this doesn't become a trend. Only a few schools did opt out of the bowls, and I like that the conferences find them, right? Trying to say like, hey, we need to fill these obligations. So hopefully it's something that dwindles each year, but I don't know. Maybe this will be the new norm, right?
I also think from a player perspective, if you're not an outgoing senior, if you're an underclassman, whether you're staying at your current school or you're transferring, if you're planning to, I would want to get an extra game of tape out there, right? And to see, okay, if somebody else wants me, let's go, especially if you're a guy, because we see it, backups from big schools will go and start elsewhere. Don't you want, at least one game of tape to show what you can do, even if you're planning on transferring, just to get it out there? Like they always say in football, your tape is your resume, right? And if you got nothing out there, I mean, maybe the suspense, maybe teams will pay for what you could be, but wouldn't you want to put something out there in a real football game that's being played between two good football teams? Wouldn't you want that on tape? Wouldn't you want that resume out there? I would think any underclassmen would want to play, absolutely, whether they're staying or not, because that's their one opportunity in the moment to play.
I totally agree. And it's just, this is the interesting state of how upside down in some parts of college football are, unfortunately, that we have teams that choose to opt out. It's unfortunate, but I'm glad Utah's going to be in there as playing Nebraska. Just like always glad whenever you make the time to come on with us, Dalton. Thank you so much, sir. Please let everyone know where they can find more of your work at.
Absolutely, JT. We're covering the playoff front to back. We're going to cover the transfer portal front to back once we get there on the PFF College Football Show on YouTube. Myself and Max Shadwick, game previews, game reviews, mock drafts are coming actually later this week. We got a mock draft coming later this week. And then, of course, once we hit the transfer portal, like you mentioned, and any other coaching hires and all of that, we'll be covering all of it on the PFF College Football Show.
Awesome, Dalton. Thank you for making the time.
Appreciate it as always, JT.
That's going to do it for today's episode of Locked On Utes. We'll be back tomorrow trying to keep all the Utah portal action straight as the offseason outside of bowl game, thankfully for Utah, gets underway.